What's up, guys, and welcome to another episode of Two Car Garage. You are getting in at the ground floor because we are just getting started on our Yamaha Virago project. This is the early 1980s Japanese V-twin, air-cooled, shaft drive with the monoshock rear suspension, and this one has the 920 engine, which is the one that you want. So, as you might recall from the last video, be sure you go back and watch if you didn't already, I have like 3.5 of these Viragos, and I'm going to pick and pull from each one, and I have tons of new parts sitting on the side of the garage here. But the first thing we need to do with our unmolested bike is see if the engine runs. So let's get it prepped to start. That means pulling the seat, the tank. I have a single carb manifold that I'm going to hook up, put up the single carb to it, make sure that the electrical is working enough to at least spin the starter motor, and see if it starts. All right, so as we go in, the top image is straight down and the bottom one is a side view. So you can see the top of the piston there on the top image, and it's pretty clean. Looks pretty nice, but once we go down, you see on the side, so the bottom square, that the side of the cylinder walls have all that rust pitted there. All right, the inside of the cylinders didn't look that bad. The back cylinder, looked a little bit more rusty than the front one. The front cylinder walls were pretty much completely clean. The back one had a little bit of rust on it, but I think it'll clean up once you run it for like just a couple minutes. Oh yeah, that's smooth. Probably because there's going to be zero compression. All the piston rings gone. So because this is going to be totally custom, I'm just throwing a random battery in from another bike for now, just to see if it turns over and cranks. I'm just going to try to jump the solenoid, see what happens. Sounds pretty good. And here's the carb setup we're going to use. I ordered offline this custom-made manifold, and then I just took one of the stock carbs, separated it from the other carb, rebuilt it, painted it black. So we'll hook it up and see what happens. So a small change of direction with what I'm going to do for this thing. I originally planned on using a stock Hitachi carburetor because I saw that people did online. So I cleaned it, I rebuilt it, I painted it nice and black. And the only reference to what size main jet to use, because remember, we're going from 2 carbs to 1, so the main jet is going to have to be a big honker, was somebody who drilled it out to 1/8 of an inch. So not exactly precise. I tried to get it started. This was just flooding basically and not starting. So I kind of always knew that I didn't want to run the stock carb just because of aftermarket support as well for those are really low. So I ended up purchasing a Mikuni VM30, which is like the most common performance aftermarket carb ever. People online said to use the stock 250 main jet, so I didn't have to rejet or anything. I attached it on. Let's see if it starts. Oh, I also cleaned the push button, so that works now, so I don't have to jump the solenoid anymore. Well, it's sure got fuel. with a 2-to-1 manifold, a Mikuni VM30 with the stock jets that it comes with, which is a 250 main jet and whatever the small idle jet is. And the choke on, it popped right off. It ran well, it idled well. So the next thing to do is start stripping it down, right? Taking off non-essential items. And hopefully along the way, we'll start figuring out the electrical stuff, because this is a really complex electrical system with like 8 different relays, tons of different safety switches and safety mechanisms. So we'll kind of have to go through that as we can, I guess. So let's start stripping parts. Well, after countless hours, I mean, I can count probably like 8 to 10 or something, of work, I have it pretty well stripped down, especially the electrical. That was the big whammy, right? We got the engine running, that's great, the carb is hooked up, but the electrical was the hiccup, and that's always what takes so much time, just dealing with the spaghetti of wiring. And this was a really complex bike. There was a lot of relays, a lot of different things crisscrossing back and forth because it was new technology at the time. So it took a while to sort through it, but I like doing it now because it doesn't matter if you scratch stuff, you're not going to mess up a fresh paint job. So I like to do all this fabrication and sort of custom work before I really start piecing everything back together, because that's when, you know, everything should be set. And then you put it back together with sort of white gloves on. Now, it does take longer this way, right? Because you're putting it together, taking it apart, putting it together, taking it apart. But it's my method, and I think it's the better method of building a bike. So let me show you how I have the electrical system stripped down to the essentials and sorted. So in the front here, we have everything trimmed down except our tach that we're going to run. And our headlight, we're not running any turn signals, no other meters, no nothing. So that really simplified this wiring up here. All we have is this little bundle here. The fuse box is still up here, but we're going to end up converting that from these tube fuses to like normal mini blade style fuses. So that'll be different, but all the wiring will pretty much still be here. Headlight, meter, and then we have our switch. Now, I am not going to run a key on this bike. Instead, I have this Motion Pro on-off and start switch, and this is a normal kill switch, right? Like, that's why it's big and red. But instead of killing the bike, what I have it do is this is basically your on position. So with the press of this button, you activate all the electronics on the bike. The ignition, the lights, everything is activated. So when you flip it off, it kills everything on the bike as well. So it's pretty much like a kill switch, because with this switched off, the bike can't run anyway. Honestly, I'm not worried about, you know, having a key and then a separate kill switch. Everything runs through one push button. And then the momentary switch is still to start it or not. You can see the bundle coming back, goes to the ignition computer here. Then we have significantly fewer wires going to the battery, to the tail light, which of course I'm not going to use this tail light, but it's just 3 wires here, so no sense hooking the new one up just to see if it works or something. The only other wires that are here are the diode for the lights and the neutral safety switch over on the other side. And then of course we still kept the regulator rectifier, which is down there. So that's it. This thing is stripped down and simplified. I mean, this is it, right? A few wires going to the back, a few more wires going to the front. We're keeping our stock wiring for now, going to the ignition coils until we have to replace that. But let's check it out and see how all this looks. So with a push of this button, we should get a headlight, a gauge, and a tail light. We have a headlight, a gauge, and a tail light. And we should be able to crank and have spark. And we have spark. So we have everything it needs to run. Let's see in its current condition if it starts, to make sure that we didn't accidentally mess anything up with the computer. So there's probably a few questions in your mind like, what about the headlight? Hold on a second. Am I not running any left-hand control switches? Am I not running anything on the left-hand clip-on? No, I'm not. Think about what's over there. A horn? Doesn't have one. Turn signals? Not running them. High beam, low beam. What about high beam, low beam? I'm not going to use it. I don't care. I'm just going to keep high beam and low beam on all the time. I'm running it all. Heck, this LED light even has like daytime running lights. I'm going to turn those on too. It's all LEDs. It's drawing such low current from the system. I'm not worried at all about it like, burning out or anything. It's LEDs. So I'm not going to run any controls on the left-hand side. And on the right, all I'm using is that tiny little momentary switch and the start switch for the engine. So this thing is simple, clean, and it's going to be mean. Well, a huge relief to all of us that not only does it run, but we have the electrical system sorted out, it shifts through all the gears, and it is looking like the beginnings of a great project. So what's the next step now? Now that we sort of have the custom electrical sorted, I think the next step is to continue pulling off like the back end, take that rear fender off, maybe even replace the front end with our Gixxer front end. That might be a good next thing to do. And that way we can get the front headlight and everything sorted. Yeah, I think we'll do that. While we have the front end off, we'll wire in and figure out how to fab up a mount for our new ignition coils and build our spark plug wires. As always, thank you so much for watching another episode of Two Car Garage. Got a lot of work done. Be sure you stay tuned for when the next video drops so you can keep up to date with our Yamaha Virago 920 project. Thanks for watching.